Hi, welcome back to the Unstuck podcast. I'm Heather,
I'm Cameron.
and today we want to talk about what's really going on when we face severe hardships or trials in our life. And I'm talking about when we experience real suffering and failure.
Especially ones that feel unfair or inexplicable or just out of nowhere
Or
or when it seems like you're doing everything right. Just the ones that just feel like
like you've
they're
been smacked down
yeah.
and you rack your mind to think what could I have done differently to have avoided this, right? Um And those things happen to each and every one of us. There is not one of us on this planet that's going to get away from dealing with situations like that throughout our lives. And I believe that there is a divine purpose in it. Um, and it's oftentimes through those moments that bring us to our knees, literally and figuratively, where we call upon God in desperation because we don't know what to do on our own. That we have the most opportunity and best chance of having significant growth and transformation in our lives. And I bet as you're listening to this, you might even be thinking back to a time in your life where you went through something terribly difficult and you are seeing how your life changed and hopefully for the better. I don't think it always has to be for the better because it really is dependent on how we choose to look at it. But I'm sure every single one of you, as you're listening to this, can identify a moment in your life where you went through significant struggle, and suffering, and it changed you. And so, what we want to talk about specifically today is how to lean into allowing it to change you for the better, and allowing these trials to propel you into something even more um, amazing, and maybe even something that, as you look back on later, you might not want to go through that trial again, but you're grateful for what it brought you.
Well, and I'll go even a little further. I think there's a lot of trials that when you look back on them and the stuff you'll realize the suffering and the failure that you experienced are actually what made the growth happen.
And I totally agree with that, Cameron. I think to our personal situation, the reason why we're doing this podcast specifically, the both of us had hopes and desires and dreams of a marriage that we didn't know how to create ourselves. And it wasn't until we were faced with the suffering that we both went through as you had to confront, you know, sharing your past and the pornography addiction with me. And then I had to confront um, the reality that I was living inside of a marriage that I felt was so different. That's something that I just didn't even think was possible could happen. And it wasn't so much that like you were tempted with it. It was that a secret like that could be held for decades between the two of us. And that was just so, uh, you know, hard to wrap my mind around and literally like metaphorically like knocked me off my feet. And I know that you went through something similar when you realized and you were confronting that you were actually going to have to verbalize something that you were scared of and had hidden so deeply for so long. But without that opportunity, we were just kind of floating along. Like we weren't bad, but we weren't great. We weren't excellent
Well,
either.
and we didn't have, and I think most people find themselves in this situation. You don't even have the ability to understand what the next steps are. You know there's something more that you want. You want a result, or there's something about your life that you want to change,
Uh,
but it's not until these dramatic things happen in your life that you even have the ability to understand how to go forward.
well, and I think you fool yourself. You have ideas of what going forward looks like.
Oh yeah,
Because I
my
don't think
my bad plan, I call it my bad plan, was to get clean for a year and then talk to you, because then I'd be strong. I could say, and then it would feel like it was in the distance, and I could tell you that it was in my
you weren't
past.
currently struggling, so it was a
Right,
lot safer to be seen
right,
if was
and
behind you.
and it was it had not worked at all, and it was never going to work. I don't believe it ever would have worked.
Well, because the cure was honesty
Mm-hmm.
and being seen.
But I didn't. While I understood that component, I didn't understand that that would be the healing power in itself.
And I think on my end too, like all the little things that, like, I knew our relationship wasn't exactly where I wanted it to be, but I couldn't put a finger on exactly why. So everything that I was trying to address it was more like band-aids. It was like, well, blood is coming from somewhere, so I'm going to put a band-aid where I see the blood on the skin, but the wound is like somewhere completely different, and I wasn't even addressing it. And until we had that opportunity, we just were missing the mark completely, because like your solution was quit pornography and my solution was figure out a way to make you happier in ways that I knew you weren't happy, and to not feel like I was killing myself while doing it, right? Like we were just missing the mark completely. And so what this did was kind of like ripped everything open and like it's like the wound was completely the wound in our relationship was completely revealed, and then we could either decide to like quickly cover it back up again and ignore it, right? Or we could clean it out, dress it, and let it heal. And we chose that harder path of doing the work.
What's interesting is I'm not sure we even really. I don't know how conscious we were. Yes.
Well, I was conscious. I was conscious enough in that I knew that I did not want the marriage to end, that I valued our relationship enough, and I knew that I was going to do what it took to do everything I could to influence change.
But I just find it interesting that we're talking about how you progress through suffering and failure, how in some ways you have to. And it's funny how like I even feel like I had a failure of understanding that we were doing these really important steps. I think like you said, it came from having a core intention that helped orient us to do those things almost naturally. But I do think having a conscious awareness of it is really helpful.
The conscious awareness of what we were doing.
Like, well, yeah, like if somebody talked to us like this and helped us understand that the suffering we're experiencing now is going to be
this is going to be for your good,
right?
This has the potential.
I mean, I understood that suffering's for my good, but I don't know if I understood that the type of suffering we were going through was
it was more at the time like it could have been avoided, and like regret. There was some regret, and what we didn't realize was how powerful this failure, this mistake, this suffering could be in allowing us to step more fully into our best selves, show up better for each other, and then create more of the life together that we actually really wanted and did not know how to do before. So I remember the first time that I heard this idea on a podcast where it was a therapist that was talking about how her most successful clients were the ones that had been going through like crisis, and that when that happens, when it's not just the people that are like, I'm mildly unhappy with you and you're mildly unhappy with me and we want things to be better, but we're just kind of like going through life, so let's give this a shot. Like it literally was couples that came in that both, and I think the key too is they wanted the relationship to work, but like they were in crisis. And I just found that kind of really comforting, because so much of the time you hear the stories where people are in crisis and it falls apart and it never works and like everything's ruined and all is lost. And to hear a professional say that those couples that came in and were willing to do the work and they wanted the relationship, that they were usually the prime examples of what true transformation could look like, and that they were often the most successful clients that they had. And I just remember, like, especially in the early days, leaning on that as okay, like we're already there, like we both want this and we're both working and we're both willing to be introspective and look at ourselves and not just place blame on the other person as the cause of all of our problems. And we want this marriage to work, and we definitely have a crisis on our hands. And if we keep going and we keep trying and we don't give up, and we will be one of those success stories. And what was really interesting to me, and I think it's worth pointing out, because you won't necessarily feel that you are one of those success stories when you're in the thick of it and in the middle of it, because there's still a lot of pain and suffering. Suffering is a real feeling, and it's part of that growth process. And I remember when we first, like one of the first sessions that we had with our therapist, like early on, where he was telling us that we are, just at what we're a couple months in, and that we were actually had done more work and were further along than some people who he'd been seeing for years. And that the things that we were doing were were unique in that we were doing them on our own. And a lot of the list and the boxes that you would check off as you're working with a couple in a similar situation, we had already done, because it came intuitively and naturally to us. And I really think that I have to credit that to just like both of us choosing all in and working together. And I think some of those things just naturally happened. Like, we really didn't have a book. We didn't have any kind of like material that we were working through.
I really think our mindset training that we have been kind of going through for a number of years beforehand had a good. It's cool to look back and just see how there were lots of little things that were kind of helping you along the way to make the path straighter.
But I think that the core principle of that was that, like, for me, like, as I look back, that what I leaned onto was like, I can only control what I can control. And also the idea of ownership, that while I'm not responsible for your actions, I am responsible for how I respond, and I'm responsible for my contribution to the messiness that we were in.
Well, and when we write our book, I think that is going to be the foundational thing we talk about, because I do think that the most foundational thing that starts for your own progression in life, for you to be able to even recognize when you're progressing, is to obtain and seek after a mindset of responsibility. I've heard it called a lot of different things. Radical ownership, I think, is what I've heard it called before. But there's lots of ways to name it. But I really think that is just so foundational, because once you, and I call it recognizing that you're the agent of change in your life. But once you recognize that you're the one that has the mind, like I believe even God isn't going to be the one that changes you. He facilitates change through you providing the spark.
It's your choice.
Right.
To
the reason why in the scripture it's ask and you receive, knock and it shall open it to you. It's for you to move first. And I think that is so foundational. I think it's so important.
The suffering, the failures, all of that are the knock.
Yes. But I think that mindset, because we've been working on that, when the crisis happened, we were ready to say, how do I work? How do I change?
And I already had a firm belief and understanding and knowledge that if I were to sit there and go, poor me, look what you did to me, and just dig into that I was only going to get more upset. I was only going to hurt worse, and it wasn't going to solve any problems. And so if I really wanted to inspire change, and I needed to own up to my part of the dynamic that was fractured and broken so that we could heal completely. And that had nothing to do with owning any of your choices to view pornography or to lie to me, but it had everything to do with me being judgmental, because I couldn't tolerate a truth like that. It had everything to do with me not doing all that I could to try. I had walls around me to protect myself, and I was watching, I could see how I contributed to distance in our relationship in ways that could only have made your situation more complicated.
Well, it's funny how all these things circle around too, because you also had to embody the fact that you weren't responsible for my part in it. Yes. You weren't responsible for me. You didn't make me watch pornography, and I didn't believe you did either. And by both of us taking that ownership right away, I really do think
because
It's the linchpin.
you often have couples where like the spouse that has betrayed will try and place blame on
Yes.
the spouse, like, well, you know, you didn't want to have sex with me, and I had needs, and you weren't there for me, and so you know, you're part of the problem, you're part of the reason, and
All those
because,
things could be true,
well,
but
no,
but all those things they said
that person wasn't doing,
right,
correct, but they never made that person do that.
Exactly.
And so like I think that's how we really kick things off on a really strong foot, because you took ownership, and the first thing you said to me that day was, this isn't your fault. Like, this isn't your fault. And you reinforced that all the way through. And it opened the door to allow me, like, if I had to start defending myself because you did that, like, that would slow things down. And if I started just blaming you for all of the problems that we ever had, and like, this is why we've had all our problems, right? If I just said like, your pornography addiction, well, that's why we had all this, and that's why I did this, and now I know, and I put that out there, then that would have only slowed down our healing process. And for what? Like, why add more suffering? There was already enough in the situation itself. And so for us, I think that really helped to have us both on the same page there. And I think, like, for me, if I could get one thing across from this episode, in this conversation, is if you can really just take a step back and like give space to the other person that may have hurt you, and just take that energy that you might want to fight back, you might want to scream, might want to like hurt because they hurt you, and just go, okay, what do I really want? Like, if I want this relationship to crumble and this is just the excuse I've been looking for, then see that, and then give yourself some peace by saying, okay, I'm leaving now. You know what I mean? Like if that's really what you want and you're just looking for the reason, then go ahead and do it. Give yourself peace. You don't have to fight. Or if you're like, I'm angry right now, you hurt me, and I'm really sad, I'm hurting, this is awful, but I also want this to work.
Yeah.
And if you can just take that step back and go, okay, my actions are going to matter with how fast I get to have the results that I'm looking for.
I really like what you touched on there, is that I think a lot of times we can misplace responsibility with self-flagellation. We like, so giving yourself, if
I'm not talking about beating yourself up.
Right. Like, really another core thing is having an intention. So if your intention is to fix something, then beating yourself up does not fix it. Taking responsibility, saying, hey, I messed up, I did the wrong thing, making things right, that will serve the intention of progressing and getting better. So really having radical ownership and then intention, I think, helps you when you hit those failure moments, those crisis moments, and helps you move forward.
And if we could just throw away this idea that like you're somehow going to get away like with a relationship where you never mess up and you always show up perfectly, and like there's nothing anyone could ever like criticize you for because you're like the perfect partner. You know, you're going to make mistakes. Like, there is no way around that. Like, that's what relationships are all about. I really, God gave them to us so that we could learn how to grow and to love and to be humble and compassionate towards ourselves and to the other person. And so just like, get curious. If you're having a problem and there is contention, there is disconnect, like, ask, well, what am I doing to contribute to this? Because I guarantee you are. And again, this is not to place blame on someone else's poor choices.
And this is only responsible for yourself, not for them. Differentiate yourself. Separate yourself from the person's problems, and you're trying to serve the thing, which might be your relationship, which could be a goal. That's what you're doing. You're serving the goal by saying, I'm going to take responsibility for how I am damaging this goal, how I am damaging the relationship.
Yep. So I want to give an example of what we're talking about to help put it into perspective. And I just remember being really impressed with Elizabeth Smart and reading about her experience after she was recovered. And this happened long ago, like
a long time
ago. Elizabeth Smart was like, I think 13, 14 years old when she was abducted from her bedroom and was kidnapped and held like made a second wife to this man who basically like brainwashed her and told her he was a prophet, and that she, like it was some bad, nasty stuff that she went through. And when she was recovered and she was visiting with her mother after it all happened, and she wrote about this, her mother said to her, Elizabeth, no, like what happened to you was so wrong. And you lost 9 months of your life to this man who did such evil, horrible things. But it's over now, and don't let him take another second of your life. And she talks about that as like a turning point for her in letting go and controlling what she could control and taking ownership of what she could own in the situation. And I think this perfectly represents what we're talking about here. Elizabeth Smart was a little girl and had nothing to do with the man that she was not her fault by any stretch of the imagination that this man snuck in to her bedroom and abducted her when she was a child. But after she was recovered and she was getting the help that she needed, she could choose to let this man affect the rest of her life, shape the rest of her life, cause her to feel things that she wouldn't want to feel. And understandably so. I don't think anyone could blame her if she had gone down that path. Like, what a horrific thing. I can't even imagine what she must have gone through. But this little girl decided that she wasn't going to allow him to take anything more from her. And because she was free, she was going to use that freedom to choose to let him go and let God deal with him and to move on. And then she took her terrible, awful situation, and now she's an advocate. And she's out there doing good with the miserable thing that she had to go through. And she's turned it into something powerful and something that's changing lives and helping other people. And that's what we're talking about. It's reclaiming your power and not staying a victim. She was victimized, but she didn't have to stay a victim for the rest of her life. And she chose instead to make something more and to use her agency and her free thought, her free will and choice to do something better. And that's what we're talking about. She owned what was hers, what she had the ability to change, what she had the ability to do to change and influence her situation. She couldn't get back those 9 months. She couldn't erase the past, but she could decide how she wanted to react to it and how she wanted to show up with the rest of her life. And I think she's such a beautiful example of strength and the power of how we choose to think, like what that can do for us if we choose to take suffering and let it help us grow and change and become who we are here to become. And I'm quite sure that her example and the work that she's done since then has saved lives and helped so many people, so many more people than she probably even is aware of. I'm sure she's aware of quite a bit. And people that she'll never even know about that she's been able to help because of that choice that day to not let this define her. She gets to define herself. And that's essentially what I decided in that moment with us, is that I'm going to decide how this is defining me. I'm going to decide to use what choices I have and the influence that I have now and the changes I want to make and who I want to be to change my outcome instead of just going, oh, look what you did to me. I'm, now I don't get what I thought I had and now I'm just miserable. And trust me, I am tempted to go back there. It is those feelings are so easy to fall into. They do not require work. They require just literally living unconsciously. They require nothing more than just allowing life to happen to you. And so I can easily slip back into those moments, especially when I'm having a down day or I'm feeling weaker. But there's so much more power that comes from saying, I choose. This is how I want to be. And I own my own life. And I'm really grateful that I had that tool when we started because it made a huge difference for our healing journey. And you having that tool made a huge difference for our healing journey. We still weren't perfect at it. Like, if we were perfect at these principles, we wouldn't have been in that place. We wouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. But I'm grateful that we had that. And so if anyone else is struggling or finding themselves in a similar situation where you have a crisis in front of you that could tear you apart, own what's yours. Don't allow yourself to fall into the comfort and like weird easiness of victimhood. It is so enticing, and I don't know why. Like, I really, like, it is not what you want. It will never produce happiness. It only produces more pain. And so do everything you can to say, nope, I get to choose who I want to be. I have a choice here. I get to be in power if I want to. And I'm going to live my life in integrity with how I want to show up and allow that to work for my betterment and my good. I get to change. I get to become better.
Yeah. And recognize how that the pain and suffering you're going through, I think you can get a viewpoint where you don't have to like what's happening. I don't think you ever will. If you're suffering and you're going through pain, you're feeling failure, you don't have to like it.
Or even say, like, it's okay that it happened, because there are some things that are not okay that happen.
But I do think you can, even in the middle of it, understand that it will pass. You will have growth from this, and you can look forward to that. You can bring forth hope that you will see the growth later. And when you do that, I believe the growth will come to you quicker and more powerfully.
Our minds are exceptionally powerful. If you believe something, you will find the evidence that it's true. If you believe that you are disadvantaged, that life will never be the same, that things are ruined and nothing will ever be what you wanted it to be, then you will find evidence all along the way that that's exactly what will happen. But if you believe that this can be the springboard for massive transformation, for me to step more fully into my power, and I love this idea that this thing that is happening is only happening to me because it is my best chance, my best shot at learning everything I need to learn so that I can be prepared for when I go back to God, that I can be prepared for my eternal life. And I love that concept because it removes any idea of what's fair or so-and-so never had to go through this. Why do I have to? It's because God knows you personally and he's giving you an opportunity to grow because he sees your potential and you don't. And this is the opportunity to help you understand what your potential is and to step fully and more boldly into the person you were created to be that you just forgot about, because we're in this mortality, this existence where we don't remember who we were before. We don't have the blessing of remembering the glorious creation that we were as one of God's children. We've forgotten that, and we get opportunities along the way to remember. And the best part is we don't have to do it alone. We have our Heavenly Father who loves us. We have a Savior who died for us. And thankfully, and you're probably listening to this podcast if you're married, because that's what we're talking about here. And thankfully, we have a partner to do it with in life as well. And I'm so grateful that I don't have to do this alone. And to remember that, like, we're not enemies here. We get to work together. We get to be on a team and help each other. And the quicker you can move towards that we're teammates here, we're not enemies, we want to help each other, we love each other, especially if that's true, because most of the time it is. We just convince ourselves that it's not sometimes. Like, just life gets a whole lot easier when you don't have to fight somebody that's really not wanting to fight you. And you can just be a teammate.
Yeah. Just remember, if it's your choice, that everything's happening for you, not to you. Thank you for watching.
Have a great day, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.